Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to the explainer. Right now, there's a 9-digit number sitting in your wallet, or maybe just memorized in your head, that you probably rarely even think about. Yet, it literally dictates every single facet of your modern existence. Today, we're acting as a specialized analytical engine, bringing you a high-level intelligence briefing on a topic that fundamentally runs modern life. We're going to deconstruct the absolutely critical role of unique numeric identifiers within these massively complex national systems. And look, we aren't just skimming the surface here. We're digging deep into the actionable insights, the implicit assumptions, and those non-obvious details of how these architectures actually function under the hood.
In our modern national infrastructure, you aren't defined by your name or your face or your personal history. No, you are defined by a number. Exactly 9 digits. That's the stark reality of our systemic architecture. Think of these 9 digits as an absolute boundary line. On one side of that line, total systemic invisibility. You literally have an inability to legally work, use a bank, or even exist in the eyes of the state. But on the other side, complete legal and financial existence. And the implicit assumption of this system is super crucial to understand. The state didn't design this massive architecture out of malice. It was built out of this insatiable need for ultimate administrative efficiency. It relies entirely on taking incredibly complex human lives and intricate corporate structures and reducing them down into easily sortable binary data nodes. So here's our agenda for today. 1. The 9-digit system core. 2. Mechanisms of status verification. 3. Integration with commercial infrastructure. 4. Systemic vulnerabilities and risks. And finally, 5. Actionable compliance and safeguards. All right, let's start with Section 1, the 9-digit system core, parallel mechanisms of state recognition.
For individuals trying to navigate the incredibly complex bureaucratic framework of a new nation, this 9-digit personal registration identifier is everything. It's the absolute prerequisite for any interaction with federal or legal authorities. Expert analysis actually shows that this number acts as a universal tracking mechanism across everything: court filings, benefit eligibility, administrative hearings, you name it. And what's truly fascinating is the historical context of systems like these, specifically in the United States. Believe it or not, these personal identifiers were originally designed exclusively for one very narrow purpose: tracking retirement. But thanks to some immense systemic mission creep over the decades, they've implicitly evolved into a mandatory national ID. They fundamentally act as a pervasive digital passport, just without the physical card. Without it, you're basically a ghost in the machine. But with it, every single legal maneuver and status update is permanently tethered to this 9-digit anchor.
Now, the exact same logic applies over in the commercial realm. Just as individuals require a number, commercial entities are completely paralyzed without their 9-digit business equivalent. It acts as the ultimate gatekeeper for all commerce. The really non-obvious insight here is that the state doesn't actually track businesses as abstract concepts. They track these 9-digit codes. As far as the system is concerned, the code is the business. Consider the real-world consequences of this architecture for a second. You could have a multinational corporation with $1 billion in physical assets, massive intellectual property, and global momentum. But if its 9-digit code is flagged, missing, or locked up, that corporation literally cannot issue a single local paycheck. They can't open a basic operating account. They can't even process a standard invoice. The institutional paralysis is absolute.
Moving right along to Section 2. Mechanisms of status verification, the architecture of automated authorization. Let's look at how this actually plays out. The automated verification flow is rigid, it is unforgiving, and it happens in milliseconds. Here's the sequence. An individual presents their 9-digit identifier to a local agency. Say you're going for a driver's license or some healthcare benefit. That agency inputs the number into a secure electronic verification network. Instantly, this network queries centralized federal records. And then, based strictly on the alignment of that data, the system returns a binary response: approval or denial. That's it. There's no gray area whatsoever. The 9-digit number is the absolute primary trigger for this entire automated chain.
and it's wild to think about. But a staggering volume of these automated database queries happens every single second across the country, quietly authorizing or halting thousands of lives and livelihoods all at the exact same time. Now, there is a crucial, totally non-obvious detail here that a lot of people overlook. The electronic verification network itself is basically just a messenger. It does not maintain independent records, and it absolutely cannot fix your file. So this means any underlying data flaws tied to your 9-digit number in the central database will automatically and repeatedly result in systemic rejection at the local level. The system implicitly assumes that the central database is completely infallible. If the central data is wrong, the messenger is just going to cheerfully deliver a catastrophic denial every single time you attempt to interface with society.
Next up, Section 3, Integration with Commercial Infrastructure, the Financial and Employment Ecosystem. Consider the stark contrast between having this identifier and lacking it in the open market. It's night and day. Without the 9-digit business code, you are facing an absolute blockade. Banks will just deny you access entirely. Hiring, it's essentially illegal because you can't run electronic employment confirmations. Digital platforms will reject you outright. But the very moment that 9-digit identifier is integrated into the system, it instantly unlocks seamless integration with payroll, banking providers, the whole 9 yards of third-party processing. It is a literal binary switch between total commercial isolation and global market access. And what is really critical to realize here is that third-party payment processors are essentially acting as deputized enforcers for the state. By utilizing this binary switch, private financial platforms are doing all the heavy lifting of compliance for the government. And trust me, the enforcement net is shrinking rapidly. Just look at this timeline for digital payment platforms. In 2024, the reporting threshold tied to your 9-digit identifier was $5,000. Fast forward to 2025, and that threshold drops to $2,500. By 2026, a strict $600 reporting threshold is going to be implemented across all commercial accounts. The major analytical takeaway here is the implicit assumption made by federal tax networks. They are relying entirely on this 9-digit number to automatically track and enforce these increasingly microscopic digital revenue thresholds. If you sell goods online, the system sees absolutely everything through the lens of those 9 digits, completely automating financial surveillance down to fractional levels. All right, let's dive into Section 4, Systemic Vulnerabilities and Risks, Data Misalignment and the Burden of Proof. Here is the cause and effect matrix of data entry, and it really highlights just how fragile your existence is within this system. If your identifier perfectly aligns with a central database, great, you experience a seamless systemic match, instant access to benefits, legal portals, and commercial operations. But consider a single-digit mismatch. If a local clerk makes one tiny typographical error, or if your name control doesn't perfectly match the central file, the result is catastrophic. To give you some expert context on that non-obvious detail, name control typically relies on just the first 4 letters of your business or personal name. Yeah, 4 letters. This is a severe limitation born from legacy database constraints programmed decades ago, yet it still entirely dictates modern commerce today. If those 4 letters don't perfectly align with the 9 digits, boom, you face immediate automated rejection, frozen legal status, and a total loss of institutional recognition. And here's the really harsh reality of this architecture. As the quote says, the system's data is implicitly assumed correct unless the applicant actively proves otherwise through physical documentation. The bureaucratic machine places the entire burden of proof onto you, the individual or the business owner, to correct their systemic misalignments. The computer is always right, implicitly. And look, as anyone who has ever had to argue with a federal database knows all too well, the computer doesn't care about your deadlines, your rent, or your payroll obligations. It will wait indefinitely until you go through the immense friction of proving it wrong. So what happens if you actually fall victim to a data mismatch? Well, here are the grueling manual steps required to override an automated 9-digit rejection. First, you've got to hunt down and identify the specific federal agency that originated the flawed data in the first place. Then, you must procure original physical evidence. We aren't talking about a quick scanned PDF or an email here. We're talking about waiting weeks or even months to get certified birth records and physical passports. Finally, you have to actively present this evidence to a high-level reviewer or administrative judge just to manually override the system. I mean, really think about the profound absurdity of that process for a second. You are utilizing antiquated, paper-based physical evidence to resolve an automated digital error that was created in milliseconds. It is a massive, frustrating expenditure of time and resources, which brings us to our final section, Section 5. Actionable compliance and safeguards securing the central node. If 9 digits define your existence, then it turns out 6 digits are required to protect it. This number, 6, represents the digits in the cryptographic PIN used by national tax authorities as the ultimate defense mechanism against identity theft. What's absolutely crucial to understand analytically here is that this 6-digit PIN is a relatively new adaptation. It really represents a reluctant acknowledgement by the state that their foundational 9-digit architecture is fundamentally insecure in a fully digital age. A permanent, unchanging 9-digit number is a glaring vulnerability, right? So this 6-digit dynamic layer was introduced as an emergency patch to basically prevent total systemic collapse from bad actors. So the crucial point here is implementing these highly effective safeguards immediately. First things first, you absolutely must apply for that 6-digit cryptographic identity protection PIN. It actively locks your underlying 9-digit identifier so no fraudulent filings can be made without your explicit authorization. Next, you need to establish secure multi-factor authenticated access to every official digital federal portal you use. Proactively monitor any automated network queries associated with your numeric identifier, and hey, always utilize encrypted communications when transmitting this data. Remember, the system is not going to protect you automatically. These 9-digit nodes are highly targeted by bad actors precisely because compromising them yields total, unrestricted financial and legal access to your entire life. You've got to play an active defense here. The architecture of state and commercial recognition is entirely reliant on these numbers, and the networks that query them, they're just becoming faster, stricter, and more integrated every single day. So I want to leave you with this. In an era of automated cross-agency data sharing, what active measures are you taking to protect the 9 digits that define your systemic existence? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer. I really hope you found this breakdown valuable, and we'll see you next time.